Maurice Nicol, Psychological Commentaries, Volume 4, Amwell, October 6, 1951. Emotions that shut. In connection with the emotional center and its power over us for good and evil, we spoke last time about how a change of emotion can change any situation. As an instance, jealousy was taken. A wave of jealousy changes everything in a moment. It is as if a door opens suddenly and slams within us and shuts out everything pleasant. Psychologically speaking, we are now in prison. Can you see in a vision how everywhere, all over the world, at every moment, similar doors are slamming and millions of people are putting themselves in prison? The enjoyment of jealousy apparently blinds us to the place it puts us in and outweighs all the discomforts of prison. It has the fatal attraction of opium, and its effects can be just as destructive. Unchecked, that is, identified with to the full, it knots and twists the skein of life, and its effects may not be repairable. The faces of those who have indulged freely in jealousy in the past are often horrible and always disagreeable. The emotion of jealousy certainly does not make people more beautiful. And one may reach a stage where one earnestly, and how earnestly, prays to be delivered. At this stage, one enjoys the emotion no longer. What helps here is a growing consciousness of the prison and its squalor, and indeed the filth of the whole condition of being jealous. All progress in emotional development is marked by a dislike of former emotions. The feeling of dislike of jealousy and the joy of being free from it in its evil prison house can become strong enough to master it. For you know that one emotion can only be conquered by another and stronger emotion. By itself, the intellectual center cannot do this. Reasoning may help, but it is not enough. What kinds of jealousy can we observe and slowly drag, as it were, struggling like snakes, into the light of consciousness, which kills them? There is this jealousy of sex. This brings up the question of the relation of jealousy to violence. Among animals at the breeding time, jealousy and violence coexist. The males try to kill each other. Then there is the jealousy of ambition. For example, men seek office, can be intensely jealous of one another, and rivalry can cause murder, as history shows abundantly. Then there is the jealousy of possessions, the bigger house, the larger car, the more jewelry, the louder splash. This does not seem at first sight to lead so easily to violence, but where money is concerned, it certainly can. There are also other kinds of jealousy also. Now, the work teaches that all negative emotions lead ultimately to violence, and jealousy is a negative emotion. I would say simply that negative states lead to hell and shut you off to everything else. The influences coming down the ray of creation and received by higher centers, which can change us, are shut out. Now, if one believes in nothing else, one could admit that sometimes one is in a better state and sometimes in a worse one. We know there are far worse states than we usually experience. We can experience hell on earth in more ways than one, externally and internally. This, I repeat, must be admitted even if one believes nothing else. And for those who have difficulty with their inner denial and awkward doubts, it can form a starting point beyond argument for the reception of the work. Now, to set about cleansing the Augean stables of negative emotions by running the river of truth over the work teaching through them is real intelligence indeed. And of course, this task gives one an entirely new angle on life and what one has to do. The result ideally speaking, would be to finally to eradicate violence. For all negative emotions lead down to violence and root in it. No one can be rising in the scale of being unless he is leaving violence and more behind him. Eventually, in one's development, violence must go. I will append here an account of an experience I had in connection with this matter some time ago. It is in the form of a dream and is as follows. The difficult to cross ditch. The difficult to cross ditch at the top of the slope is full of the bones of prehistoric animals, the remains of violent things, of beasts of prey, of monsters, of snakes. They go far down into this abyss. There is a plank to cross by, but the air seems full of restraining power, like the invisible influence of some magnet. And this, with the fear of crossing this depth, although with the width, is not great, holds me back. I cannot say for how long, for there is no ordinary time in all this. I find myself across on the other side. What wonderful vision do I now behold? I see someone teaching or drilling some recruits. That is all. At first sight, there seems nothing marvelous. He smiles. He indicates somehow that he does not necessarily expect to get any results from what he is doing. He does not seem to mind. He does not show any signs of impatience when they are rude to him. The lesson is nearly over, but this will not make any difference to him. It is as if he said, well, this has to be done. One cannot expect much. One must give them help, though they don't want it. It is his invulnerability that strikes me. He is not hurt or angered by their sneers or lack of discipline. He has some curious power, but hardly uses it. I pass on, marveling that he could do it. I could not take on such a thankless task. I come to a place, perhaps a shop, where boats are stored. Beyond is the sea. When I awake, I think of this man. To do what he is doing is so utterly contrary to anything I would do. I would need a new will to do it. I mean, I would have to go in a different direction. I never went in. I thought much about this direction. How could I define it to myself? I would have been violent to those recruits. Yes, that was it. He showed no violence. He had not a will of violence. He seemed purified from all violence. That was the secret. That was the source of the curious power I detected in him. A man without violence. And then I reflected that to reach him, I had to get across the other side of the deep gulf full of bones of prehistoric beasts where the nonviolent lived and taught, the country of the nonviolent, where recruits were being taught. He had nearly finished this lesson. Beyond was the sea, and there were the boats stored near it. No doubt, when he had finished, he was going on somewhere. As for me, I had been given only a glance into the meaning of a new will, a will not based on violence or on having your own way. I repeat, only a glance, for I knew I had not really crossed that deep gulf filled with the bones of the violent past and left it behind finally. There were no recruits for me, and certainly none of the waiting boats was mine. But from this glance, I know better that what going in a new direction is and what a new will purified from violence means. I know also that the possibilities of following this new will and new direction lie in every moment of one's life.